Hello and welcome to a new tutorial. This week we're creating this pouring liquid simulation as well as a basic condensation setup in Cinema 4D and Redshift. If you want to follow along using my CAM model, it's currently on sale over on my Gumroad for the next couple of weeks. There will be a link in the description if you want to check that out. Now let's get started with the tutorial. So getting started, I'm going to use the regular CAM model and I actually want to bring in an emitter. So we'll go emitters, basic emitter, and you can see we've just dropped in our emitter here and it's currently a square, so we want to change this. If we go into our emission shape and we'll change this to circle, and we kind of just want this to sit in this space here where our can opens, which we'll change in a second. So I'm going to kind of adjust this shape a little bit. I'm going to hold T and drag and make this a bit smaller. It's kind of just going to position it over this hole, and then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and make it a bit smaller, bring it down. So somewhere here for now, this is fine. We'll adjust it in a bit. I guess if you're following along with the can model, then we need to open the can. So just quickly, I'm going to head into select our geometry, go into edit face mode, and we need to select these faces. So I've got my loop selection tool selected and I'm just going to go in, and a little bit annoying, but if we select most of these edges here, we could probably just highlight the rest. So let's change to our brush selection and we'll make sure we've got visible only, and we can up this size and we can just draw or brush over the rest of these, and once they're all highlighted, that can be our opening. So what I'm going to do is right click and I'm going to split. So now this is a separate mesh, so we can go back into object mode, and what we need to do actually is need to change the origin point so that we can rotate it. So we're going to go up to tools, axis center, and now you can see our origin point is now here in the center, so we can rotate around it. So we need to move this point backwards around this kind of area so that when we kind of rotate it, it looks like it's opening the can. So let's move back on the Z potentially. Okay, so we need to go the opposite way. So let's try 80% and let's try rotate that and see how that looks. And we can see it starting to clip through our can opener, which, I mean, we might be even rotating that open anyway, so that might not be a problem. But I'm going to go a little bit further. I'll try 85%, execute that, and I'm going to rotate that down. Okay, now I'm going to select my can opener and rotate that to kind of look like it's actually been cracked open. I think around here looks good. So now that's done, let's go back to our emitter and let's position this kind of where we want it. So I think somewhere around here, maybe just outside of the opening, but once we get started with the sim itself, we'll be able to see how this looks. So I want to make sure that our emitter, I guess we can bring both our emitter and particle group into our can setup now, so that now when we grab the can and move it around, you can see our emitter moves with it. So now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to position the can where I'd like it. So I'm going to bring it up, I'm going to rotate it maybe 80 degrees, and then I'm going to tip it forward and kind of bring it up a little bit around here, tip it forward maybe a little bit more. Something like this looks good. I'll put in 50 degrees here, keeps it all pretty clean. And if we hit play now, you can see our sim, the particles are actually going in towards the can, so we need to turn this around. So let's go back onto our emitter and make sure we've got local controls so that we can rotate on 180 degrees on its local axis. And now if we hit play again, you can see we're pushing particles out of the can now. So it kind of looks like it's almost been cracked open, it's spraying out. But we haven't got any gravity or any other modifiers set up yet. So for now, we want to select our particle group go up to Simulate, Modifiers, Liquefy, and hold Shift, and we can drop that into our particle group. And you can see in here we've got our constraints and everything that we can adjust. I'm not going to touch any of these for now by default. What I want to do is hit Control D for our scene settings, go into Simulation, Liquids, and I'm going to change this default radius. I think for my result I went for 0.9. So that's just changing the radius of our particles. So let's hit play again, and still nothing's changed because we need to add some gravity to the scene. So we can either change our default scene gravity, or we can just drop in one. So I could go Simulate, Gravity, and drop that in here. And if we hit play again, you can see now our particles are kind of falling back into the can again. So I noticed now when I hit play, our particles are dragging back through the can, and that's because our particle group is inside of our can. So what we need to do actually is move that out of our null object and then reset the rotations to 0, 0. And you can see now this is acting the way it should do. So I'm going to go back into my emitter. I'm going to change this velocity, see what looks good. We kind of just want it to just be coming out, not shooting out. Something like this. I guess we could now up the rate. So I'm going to up this to, let's go for 2000 for now. And this is starting to look a bit better. I could keep upping this, so I think I actually went for 25,000. We hit play now, and you can see there's a lot coming out now, but we need to change a couple more parameters. So if we hit Control D again, and we go back into our scene settings for liquids, we need to change these properties here. So for neighbor passes, I upped mine to 7. And then for extra iterations, we'll go 20. Viscosity, we'll go 20. And surface tension, we'll go 20 as well. So if we hit play again, so it's going to slow down a little bit, but it's starting to stick together a little bit more. Maybe we could lower the speed. We kind of just want it to be really slightly pouring out, and we also need it to interact with the can itself, because right now it's just kind of falling through the edge. So let's go back and go to our can model mesh, right click, and add a collider. Now we can add this to the front. We could take off the bounciness, and I reckon keeping the friction relatively low. Maybe we could even just go for 0.1. Let's try that. Play 1. So we've got a few spewing out and spraying around everywhere, so we need to fix that. So what I did was go into particles back in our scene settings, and we'll go up the substeps to 4, and then in the simulation tab I'm going to up the iterations to 4 as well. Now I hit play again, and it's taking a little bit longer to sim now, but it's getting there. So still coming out a little bit too powerful. I might turn this down to 10. Now I think I might need to just change the size of the emitter, so I'm going to get in a bit closer to that, and I'm going to bring this in just a bit tighter and play that again. You can see we're getting less of the ones that are kind of spewing out to the side. It looks like it's pretty much cleaned up now. I'm going to frame my camera. I'm going to turn the focal length up to 120, and I'm going to bring this out and kind of around here, I reckon. Something like this looks nice. I'm turning the size in the particle group. I'm just turning the size to 0.5, just because when you use a higher focal length on your camera, it seems to make the particles appear bigger. Now, one thing, if I was to make the mesh invisible, is a lot of our particles are actually falling back down into the can and filling it up. Now, I did try to tweak the emitter a lot, like the position of it. I tried to bring it out more, and you can see it keeps falling back in. I guess if you do keep tweaking the position of the emitter, maybe you could find a fix for this. But what I did instead to be a bit more optimal was I placed a cylinder field inside of the can. So with the can model selected, let me just make sure that's off. I go into the fields and holding control, I selected a cylinder field. So that's placed it with the same rotation and position. We just need to kind of change our positioning, bring it up a little bit more. And then let's bring the inner cylinder out to the edge, all the way out. And I think this looks okay. We can bring in the radius. So I think now if we would hit play, let me turn off the model again and reset this. So now we need to kill those particles that are inside that cylinder. So with the particle group selected, go to simulate, modifiers, kill, holding shift, and we can set up a condition. So let's also go back to simulate, condition, field condition, and I've just dropped this on my kill, but we can move that the other way around. So kill will go on our field condition, and in that field condition with it selected, we'll have this fields tab here, which we can drag and drop our cylinder field into. So now if we go back, I'll disable my cam model and hit play. We can see that everything inside of that cylinder is being killed, and our emitter itself is actually inside that. So let's slightly bring that cylinder field back a little bit and make sure that it's not actually covering our emitter. So hit play again, and you can see now it's only coming out this way, and anything that does fall into this can or this area, this cylinder field, will be killed. So it's going to be a lot more optimal. And another thing to be more optimal is if we go back into our camera so that we can kind of get an idea for the framing, we can put a linear field below our scene. So you can see right now, if I hit play, well, you can already see all these particles are going to be falling endlessly from our scene. So hit play, they're just going to be falling and falling, more and more particles. So the scene or your computer has a lot more information to be processing. So what we can do is drop in a linear field. I'm gonna I'll keep this out of this cam model null, and I want to change it to -y. I guess we can see in a moment, and kind of position this. We can go into our camera and see, go into coordinates, and we can find where our scene is. So we kind of just want it to be just off camera, and we want to go into our field condition, and we can drop our linear field into here. If we change this blending mode to add, then when we hit play, you'll see that our particles will die once they get past this linear field. So we can go into our camera, and you can see, not that you're going to notice the difference here, but if we were to grab our linear field and bring it up, you can see we can kind of control where the particles need to disappear by. So I think this is a good level, and it's going to be a lot more optimal for our scene. Okay, so we need to turn our particles into a mesh. So what we can use for that is a volume builder, and in our object tab for that, we can drop in our particle group, and you can see it's turned our particles into voxels. So our voxel size needs to come down quite a lot. Depending on your machine, you can adjust this to what it can handle. I think I went pretty low for this, but we'll keep it around 1. I think I might have gone 0.3 in my example, but for the speed of the video, we'll keep it at 1 for now. And what we need to change is this radius, which is when you select your particle group, you'll have this radius. And we can turn this down, and it's going to change the radius of those voxels. And we can bring this right down. And you'll notice, so like if I was to up the voxel size, you'll see it just disappears. So you kind of need to find that balance of, there needs to be enough voxels for the radius. So I think I'll go for 1 voxel size, and the radius I'll go for 1.5. And then with that volume builder selected, we can put that into a volume mesher, holding Alt, and that makes that a child. And we kind of need to smooth this. So back in our volume builder, we'll drop in an SDF smooth, and that smooths that out quite nicely already. I think I might have turned my voxel distance up to 3, and that kind of, the more it smooths out, the kind of thinner or less bulky it's going to be. So if I was to kind of just turn off the particles for a sec. And I kept turning this up. You see how, yeah, look, now if you do it too much, you'll just completely remove the mesh. So I found 3 was a good level. You can also just adjust the strength so it's not quite as strong. Somewhere around here looks pretty nice. I don't like how bulky this is when it's coming out. It doesn't quite look correct. I'll turn off my volume builder and volume mesher, go back into the basic emitter, and I might even make this even more tighter and see if that's going to help. I'll hit play, and it's helping a little bit. Maybe the velocity, let me turn that down to 3 and see if that makes any difference. Not too much. I reckon if we go Control D, default radius, we could lower this even further. Let's go 0.7 and hit play. So now our particle is going to be even smaller. And I think this kind of is starting to look a little nicer. Let me turn on our volume builders and disable the particle group. And it's looking better here. However, let me come out of my camera. Because I've got this actually coming out, like the emitter itself is outside of the can, it kind of looks a little strange. We might need to actually bring it inside of the can and make sure that it's not inside that area of our cylinder field. So I'll grab that and I'm going to move that a little bit further away just so it doesn't cover our emitter. And let's see how that's looking. So now our liquid's actually coming from the inside. So what could be a good idea is bring it back even more and rotate it so it kind of faces up a little bit, and then bring it down. So it kind of, we want it to almost arch, like come up and out. So let's see, got to turn it back on in the viewport, and oh yeah, so we're covering it. So cylinder field, bring it back again until it works. Yeah, so this is working. So now you can see this is kind of looks like, at least from our camera angle, this looks like it's actually coming out of the can. But our smoothing is cutting off our particles. So we can go back into our volume builder and we can either change our smoothing, or we could keep our smoothing and lower our voxel size and adjust our radius. So finding a happy medium. I think this is something I like. So I quite like my particles right now, so I'm going to cache them. And with that cached, it's going to play back a lot quicker. We still haven't cached our volume builder, so it's still chugging a little bit, but it's pretty smooth. So this is going to look a lot nicer with a lower voxel size. So mine just came up with a warning saying it's going to take a while to calculate. So I'm going to keep it at 0.3, and I think the radius is kind of just one you have to play with until you're happy. I think 1 looks okay. I think the smoothing's at a reasonable level, maybe 75%. And then we can drop in this cache layer and we could check animation, make sure we've got enough frames, and we can cache this. Okay, so mine is now cached. So now I guess we need to add a material to our liquid. So open our material tab and drop in a new one. We'll call this liquid, and we'll drop that onto our volume mesher. Now I'm going to add a Redshift render view, and I'm going to dock this to the side here so that we can see, and I need to add some lights. So I'm going to come out of my camera quickly and just set up some quick lights. So I've got one by default which I can enable, and we can position this somewhere. Let's just preview this actually and go into our camera, and you can see our particles are showing up, so we can actually disable those here. And I noticed my cinema crashed and I haven't actually got the cached version of my particle group here, so I could actually just disable the particle group. So we can see we've got one overhead light which I can turn up the power a little bit more, maybe bring it over a bit, and we need a background. So with my camera selected, I always like to hold shift and drop in a plane, change the orientation to -Z, and just drag this all the way over so it sits behind our subject, and then just create a new material, drop that on, go into our material, delete the standard material, and I'm going to drop in a ramp and plug that in. And then I'm just going to change the black to white and have a complete white background. And that's done. Now we can add another light. Let's just do control drag. And notice I've actually got this tag here, which is a target tag, which you can find if you right click on your light, go to animation, target, and then in here you can select an object you want your light to be looking at. So I have this null object, which is actually in the center of the scene. So I'm going to bring that up and put it inside the can. So now when I drag my light around, it points towards the can. So I'm going to bring a light and put it kind of just under the can to an angle, kind of make it a bit longer. Turn down the intensity. Somewhere around there looks okay. Let's see. Let's bring that light, make that a bit wider. I think this looks okay. I'm going to quickly just change and use for the denoising. I'm going to use Auto Single. I much prefer to use this. I think it's a lot cleaner. And I think I want another light to kind of be hitting this top part. So I'm going to create another copy of this light and position that. It's going to be, I'm going to go into world positioning and kind of bring that closer and also make it a bit tighter. And then I think I might even take the tag off so that I can adjust its rotation. You kind of just need to fiddle around with the lighting until you are happy. But this is starting to get there, it's just a little bit too bright. So let's turn that down. What does it look like if I just make the spread a bit tighter? I think that's a bit better. That's okay for now. It's not a lighting tutorial, so I don't want to waste too much time on that. But the last thing I will do is just make this a lot longer, just to fill the lights on the body of the can. And I think that'll do for now. So heading back to our liquid, let's open that up and let's go down to transmission. We'll turn that all the way up. You can see we've got a pretty standard liquid material now. We can turn the roughness down even more. Don't want it to be fully glossy, so I'll keep some roughness in there. And from doing a quick Google search, the IOR for regular like drinks liquids is a 1.33 to 1.36, so somewhere around there. We'll go for 1.33. And I'm going to play around with this depth. I think I might go for a slight, maybe lemonade-ish colour. So I am going to add some slight colour to this scatter colour, and then change the depth. So you can see when it's got a really low value, it just changes it completely. This is not what we want. We can up this quite a bit because we just want it to be giving it hints of this colour. We could maybe even just make the colour itself weaker. We could even change the actual colour of the transmission. Let's kind of find a colour that suits this. Again, I don't want it to be too strong, but maybe I'll turn this one up. And for the depth, I reckon I'll put the colour back to white, but keep the depth at around 40. This might even be too strong. I might change the colour, make it even weaker. So I really don't want it to appear too strong. But I think something like that looks nice. I might go into my background colour and change this first colour to something kind of similar to my can, like a bluish colour, and that helps add some separation to the liquid. You could take this a step further and drop in some spheres and a cloner, put that in a cloner, go to your mode, object, select your regular cam model or whatever object you're using, drop that into the object, and now it's going to scatter a load of spheres all over your cam model. So we want to make those a lot smaller, quite a bit smaller, and then we'll up the count. We'll turn that quite high, and I guess we could make them even smaller. Maybe we do like 3,000. We'll make them something like this. We could add a random effector and change the scale. I think I need to make sure, yeah, if you go back into your cloner effectors, just make sure that random effector is in there. And now when you see, when I change this scale parameter, we're actually changing our spheres. So I can create a quick material, drop that on our sphere, and we'll kind of do the same thing, just turn up the transmission, turn down the roughness, and let's check in our render view. And you can see they're still probably a little bit too big, but it's looking quite nice. So let's lower this even further. Let's go 0.4. And yeah, that's starting to look nice. That's a good size, but I think I'm going to add a bit more to the count. I might up this to, let's go 12,000. And I might change this to multi-instance as well, actually. And yeah, this looks quite nice. Something that is worth noting is if you do this condensation, if you go into your render settings and head over to caustics, you can enable that and it will create a slight different look. If I hit my progressive rendering, it's slightly different. Sometimes I think it looks more realistic. You need to see for yourself, see what you prefer. You could spend a bit of time making the condensation look a lot nicer, but that wasn't the purpose of this tutorial, so I'm not going to go further into that. But there you go, you should now have a pouring liquid simulation. Hopefully that wasn't too difficult to follow along with. I think it's a pretty simple setup, not too much going on. But anyway, that's it for today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.